Hey, hey, hey. Time for the Out of This World story from rSpace. This ain't no Catalina wine mixer. Today on rSpace, OP's life took a nosedive as he uncovered the real guy from work, and let's just say this ain't ending with a glass of champagne. My wife cheated on me and married me only for a green card. I made sure she was deported. I, 28 male, met my wife, Catalina, 27 female, when we were in college. We were both enjoying a night out with our respective friends, and one of my friends pointed out that she had been eyeing me all night, and I checked her out too. I liked what I saw, and eventually my friends encouraged me with enough goading and liquid courage to go over and talk to her. She was with a group of 2 girls and a guy. Approaching girls in front of a group of other girls is daunting. I'm sure you all know. But I had a good buzz going, and I felt confident enough to give a State of the Union address. Seeing another guy in the group helped a bit as well, especially since he was clearly with one of the other girls. It turned out I had no reason to fear. The group was pretty chill, and Catalina instantly took up my offer to drink. I sat with them for a while, and they eventually excused us and gave us some privacy. The night went beautifully, and we ended up back at my place. Over the next few months, we moved fast. Really quick, we'd made it official, and she had moved into my place in less than 2 months. Looking back, perhaps that was way too fast, but it felt fine in that moment. Now, an important bit of information about Catalina. She's from Colombia, and she was here on a student visa. Once we graduated, it would only be a matter of time before her visa expired and she had to return to her country. She told me this right from the beginning, and we'd hoped she'd be able to find employment that would sponsor a visa so she could stay in the country. When the time came around, though, that hadn't worked out for us. We both didn't want her to return to her country. She hadn't had good opportunities back there, which is why she was studying for her bachelor's at an age when I was going in for my master's. I loved her drive to make a better life for herself. Then there was the fact that we loved each other. But the job market was in the gutter, and finding a job willing to sponsor her anytime soon looked hopeless. So we got desperate. We'd been dating for a long time and we were deeply in love, so we decided to get married. I'd already been thinking about marriage to Catalina for a while. We cared about each other, and she was the perfect woman for me in so many ways. I would have preferred to take a little more time to get through the dating and engagement phases, but I had no problems rushing things if it meant I could stay with her. Catalina was happy for us to get married with no fuss, but I thought she deserved a ceremony at the very least. It wasn't a big one because we didn't have much income at the time, and it was pretty rushed, but we still had a small get-together to celebrate. She didn't have family in the US, but she had a few friends. I spotted the crew from the bar back when we met, who I knew now to be Rick, Emily, and Sarah. Rick and Emily were the 2 that were dating. Her friends were very happy for her, which made me kind of jealous because I had a few friends and family who didn't approve. My mom particularly was disapproving. She felt I was rushing into things. I pointed out the time-sensitive nature of our situation, but she insisted that it would be better for Catalina to go home than for me to end up in a situation I regretted. We'd fought about this a few times, but she still showed up for me on my wedding day. She wore a sour expression most of the time, but she was there and she was cordial to Catalina. I knew that was the best I would get, so I accepted it as being enough. After the wedding, we filed the appropriate papers and were happy when everything worked as planned. She was allowed to stay in the country and she spent the time working on finding a job, without the panic from before. About a year after the wedding, Catalina had her conditional green card, and things were going well. She found a job, and I was doing better in my career. We started to plan for the future, talking about where we wanted to live and how many kids we'd have. We even discussed going to her country so I could meet her parents. Everything was falling into place. We'd rushed the marriage, but you wouldn't have been able to tell just from looking at us now. She was perfect to me, always sweet and caring. We were happy. Rick, Emily, and Sarah were a constant presence in our lives. They were all sweet to Catalina, but they were sort of strange around me. They seemed a bit stilted when talking to me, and they'd sometimes change the topic of conversation when I walked in. I asked Catalina about it one day, but she assured me that it wasn't personal. According to her, we mostly talk about things you'd find boring. Things fell apart around the time of her trip to Colombia. Catalina wanted to fly home to visit her family. I wanted to go, but the timing was bad. I didn't have the luxury of a remote job, and I couldn't get the time off from work. She was only going to spend 2 weeks there, but it felt tough to be away from her for so long. While she was in Colombia, things started to get strange. It was hard to get in touch with her. She'd often blame the bad cellular network in her country, but a lot of the times my calls went through, and I'm pretty sure they were just ignored. She had a large family, and I'd spoken with many of them on video calls before. The house was often lively and bustling, so I just wanted to assume that she was busy talking with family or helping around the house. Eventually, she came back from her trip, and she moved like she was 10 years younger. I remarked that getting home had done her good, and she agreed. But when I pushed to ask what she did when she was there, she'd just say, things, or something similarly vague. Apart from being maddening secretive about her trip, nothing else seemed to have changed about her behavior. Then, one day, I saw a message from Lewis. It was a notification that popped up on her phone while she was in the kitchen. I couldn't make it out, but the name was unfamiliar, which triggered my suspicion. Catalina usually told me everything. She loved to gossip, so I knew everything about everybody from her work, and I'd never heard of Lewis. I got up and popped my head into the kitchen. Her back was to me and she was busy at the sink, so I snuck back to her phone and swiped down to open the notification tray. I dragged down to expand the message from Lewis. It was written in Spanish. I'd been learning a bit from Catalina, but I'm honestly a slow learner, so I couldn't make out a clear meaning. I'd been considering copying the message into Google Translate when I remembered Google Lens. Thank God for Google. I pulled out my phone, and the app gave me the translated message overlaid in the original text. The message itself seemed harmless enough. Ha 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 ha, maybe next time. But it rubbed me the wrong way. What would happen next time? No matter how I tried to spin it in my head, it didn't seem innocent. I decided to confront her directly. I wanted to be honest about it. I could have just checked out her phone, but she deserved my trust. Besides, it would have been a real mess if she caught me snooping and it turned out to be a completely innocent message. Babe, who's Lewis? She didn't pause what she was doing for a second. She said he was just a guy from work. Her voice was level and her movements were normal. Everything seemed fine. She asked why I asked. I saw a notification on your phone and I've never heard of this guy. Lewis? I'm sure I've brought him up before. He's good friends with Steve. Steve was a name I knew from her work. I paused for a minute and tried hard to remember if she'd ever mentioned Lewis. I couldn't recall a single instance. Either my memory was failing me here, or my wife was lying through her teeth with frightening ease. I narrated the message to her and asked her what it meant. With the same ease, she told me he was talking about letting her take credit for a project at work. It's just a joke. I didn't really work on it, so I don't actually deserve any credit. With that, I'd gotten to the end of my line of questioning, and I let it go. But I'm still not satisfied. The only problem is that I don't know how to proceed from here. Do I confront her again? Sneak into her phone? Should I try and catch her in a lie? I don't want to believe my wife is lying to me, but I'm sure she's hiding something. However, part of me feels that she's telling the truth because she didn't even flinch when I mentioned the name. I just need clarity or it'll drive me crazy. I get it. You don't want to be the guy who sneaks into his wife's phone, but you also don't want to be the guy who lets himself get walked all over. She didn't even break a sweat when you hit her with a dreaded "Who's Lewis?" question because she's already rehearsed it before. Honestly, if you wait too long, Lewis might just send a follow-up text like, "You free this weekend?" Update 1. Well, I have a huge update. If you recall, I caught my wife texting a guy I've never heard of, Lewis. But my wife claims she talked about him all the time. Someone here gave me a great idea on how to dig deeper without going through her phone, and it worked. They said I should check her follower lists on her social media, so I did. My wife mainly uses X, Instagram, and Facebook. I started with Facebook, since she uses that the most. And what do you know? 2 Lewises popped up when I checked. One was much younger and working somewhere completely different from her. I checked out the other Lewis. He was a handsome man who lived in Colombia. I felt a chill down my spine when I saw that. I opened his account, but there wasn't much info there. A few pictures and some posts in Spanish that weren't interesting when I translated them. I was certain this was the Lewis in question, though. Could maybe next time be referring to the next time she was in Colombia? Maybe they wanted to meet up next time. Or maybe they wanted to do something they didn't get the chance to do the last time they were together in Colombia. Did she see this guy when she was there? Why did she lie that he was a guy from her work? I did briefly consider that Lewis in question might not even be a friend on Facebook, but with how much she likes the platform, I'm sure anyone relevant to her would be there. More puzzle pieces were falling into my lap now, and no matter how I arranged them, they formed a bad picture. I made up my mind to get into her phone and put my suspicions to rest. Fortunately, Catalina was usually pretty careless about her phone. She'd leave it lying around the house and often forget where it was. This made it easy for me to get my hands on her phone. I made my move while she was in the living room watching TV. She'd left her phone on the bed. I unlocked her phone, went into her messages, and opened her conversation with Lewis. Using Google Lens, I translated and read through as much as I could because it was a lot. I wasn't prepared in the slightest. All this time, my perfect wife had been dating Lewis. They'd been together since before she'd first come to the US, before I ever met her, and they were still together. The last time she had gone to Colombia, she spent a few days with him. I think I sat staring at the translated messages for a few minutes. I felt like my world was collapsing. All the love, the trust, the plans for the future. It was all a lie. Catalina had been a perfect partner. Nobody could be that good an actor. But everything we had shared was just a cover for her real plan to stay married to me long enough to become a citizen, and then divorce me and bring Lewis over to the country. Do you know how it feels to realize that the entire relationship was fake? My love was real, but it was clear I was being used the whole time. It got worse. Her friends knew about this too. According to the text, they'd been in on it the whole time. I was the mark in a detailed plan that they'd all been in on. It was at this point that I started documenting the messages. I wasn't just being cheated on, I was being used and defrauded. I wasn't just a victim of infidelity, I was the victim of a crime. I'd gotten Lewis and Emily's messages recorded, and I was working on Rick's when Catalina walked in. When she saw me with her phone, she froze like she'd seen a ghost. I'm sure I must have looked as hurt and angry as I felt because she immediately knew the game was up. She just stood there with her eyes wide, like she was trying to process what to do next. The rage in me spilled out. I bolted to my feet and screamed, "The whole dang time? You've been using me the whole dang time?" Man, I was furious. She took a step towards me. "Babe, that's not true." She asked for a chance to explain. I pointed her phone at her and said, "I know everything. This goes all the way back to the night we met. You and your friends were looking for a sucker for your plan. You hatched this plan with Lewis before you'd even left Colombia." "Babe, that was before I fell in love with you. Everything after that was real." "You had sex with him when you went back. I saw that too. Don't try to lie to me." She was silent now. I was quiet too, waiting for a response. Eventually she said, "I really do love you." She told me it was complicated and that they were through and that she had just made a stupid mistake. I saw all the texts. He said he's counting the days until I'm out of the picture. That was 3 days ago. She started spinning another lie, but I cut her off saying, "Here's what's going to happen. You'll leave the house immediately because I can't stand to be around you. After that, I'm compiling all the evidence I've gathered and reporting you for immigration fraud. Since you loved Lewis so much, I won't rest until you're deported." Now she was crying. She was choking on her words, telling me to give her a chance to explain. I walked past her and shoved her phone into her chest as I did so. I could hear her walking behind me, sobbing and trying to plead. I ignored her. I told her I was going for a drive and that she had 30 minutes to get out. If she was still around when I got back, then I would call the police. I didn't think they would arrest her based on some text messages, but I knew she wouldn't want to risk it. "Please, I made a mistake. Everything got so complicated. I didn't know how to get out of it." She was shaking now, upset and terrified. I had a very strong feeling of pleasure at that. It felt just to me. I slammed the door shut behind me, then got into my car and drove off. I drove nowhere in particular for a while, trying to figure out my next move. Was there any chance at a future with my wife? Was there a possible future where I forgave her and we worked to move past this? No, she was a snake. She played me right from the beginning. There was no future for the two of us anymore. There never was. When I got back home, she wasn't around. I needed some time to think, so I was glad she didn't make that part difficult for me. What I found annoying was that she kept texting and calling me. I completely ignored her. I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to proceed. I already knew there's no moving forward with our marriage, but I need to figure out how to make this hurt for her. Seems my mom was right all along, huh? Wow, that definitely changes things. Catalina was really playing the long game here, and it's horrifying to think how calculated it was. The fact that her friends were in on it? That takes this to a whole other level of deception. You weren't just portrayed by her, but by an entire group of people who saw you as nothing more than a pawn in their plan. It's gut-wrenching. I'm so sorry, OP. Stay strong. You deserve so much better than this, and you will come out of this stronger. This was never about you being inadequate. It was about her being a liar and a user. You're absolutely justified in wanting to make her hurt for this. Update 2. I'm back again with the final update. This chapter of my life is finally over, and I thought I owed it to you guys to come back and let you know how things ended up. I got some good legal advice from some of you on how to proceed with things, which made the whole process a lot easier for me. Catalina continued trying to contact me, but I ignored her. She never showed up at my home in person though. I think she was scared that I would call the police if I saw her. Each notification filled me with fresh rage. But one day she showed up at my work. Maybe she thought she'd be safe to meet me there because I wouldn't want to cause a scene. She was waiting in the parking lot beside my car, and she looked like a mess. She had bags under her eyes, and her normally well-groomed hair was all over the place. I don't know whether she was afraid or heartbroken, more from her love affair with citizenship being thwarted than from breaking up with me. But I didn't care. I was pleased to see her in distress like this. She hurried up to me, talking about how she had made serious mistakes and that she'd been tangled up in lies. She said the past few days had made her certain that she loves me for real and that she didn't want Lewis. I told her she was wasting her breath. I let her know the report had been filed, and I'd even spoken to an immigration lawyer. That was when she broke down again. She said we could fix things, that we could start over. She grabbed my arm and started telling me that she'd broken things off with Lewis. I told her that she could beg him to take her back because soon he'd be all she had left. This made her start crying again. I mean, she wouldn't have ended things with him if I didn't find out, so I didn't get why I was supposed to believe that she had suddenly turned a new leaf. I tried to get into my car, but she was holding my arm. She let go of me when I threatened to add assault to the list of crimes. I got into my car and told her that if she was smart, she'd leave the country herself before she was deported. I felt some satisfaction as I drove away, watching her crumple to the floor in the rearview mirror. A few weeks passed after our confrontation and I stopped hearing from her. Meanwhile, I went through the process of reporting her to the proper authorities. My lawyer assured me that it was only a matter of time before her case moved forward, giving the damning evidence. I tried to put Catalina out of my mind and move forward with life. One day I was trying to relax after a tough day at work. Then there was a knock at my door. I answered it and saw Catalina's friend, Emily, waiting for me. She looked very uncomfortable. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I hesitated, then nodded and invited her in. We sat down in the living room and I waited for her to talk. "I know you have no reason to trust me, and I'm sorry about everything that happened, but you need to know what's going on." She went on to explain that Catalina was going to be deported. She told me that the authorities had already started the process and that Catalina had wanted to ask for my help one last time, but she was scared to come to me herself. Emily told me that Catalina said my expression had frightened her the last time we met. I didn't respond right away. First, I sat there, basking in the knowledge that Catalina was going to get what she deserved in the end. Her plan had blown up in her face, and now she would suffer the consequences. "Thank you for telling me, but there's nothing I can do at this point, and even if I could, I wouldn't. Make sure you tell her that." Emily's face fell, and she looked very uncomfortable. "She really does love you. She got caught up in this mess, and we know it was wrong, but she wants to fix it now. Things are over with Lewis, too. He said he was done with her when he heard she might be deported." "I don't care. I'm done being manipulated by you guys. You know where the door is." At that, Emily looked at me, maybe searching for a sign that I could be reasoned with. When she saw nothing, she got up quietly and left. Just this morning, I finally got the final piece of closure I'd been waiting for. I was notified that Catalina was officially deported back to Colombia. Knowing that she was in a different country, an entirely different continent, felt like a shadow had been lifted from across me. The nightmare is over, and I can finally focus on putting my life back together. That might take a lot of work though, because I feel utterly betrayed. The whole thing was a lie, no matter what she tried to convince me of. I'll build myself back up though. I'm sure I will. Her sudden epiphany of, "I love you, I don't want Lewis," felt like one last desperate attempt to regain control. But you saw right through it, and honestly, the way you stood your ground? Respect. Getting that final news of Catalina's deportation, I'm sure it was bittersweet, but she made her bed, and now she's lying in it. What would you have done if you found something like this out? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. And thank you for joining us today on rSpace. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you soon.